Hello, I'm Taylor, and I'm the President and Chief Executive Officer of Generation Connection. Today, I'm filming this video from Holiday Island, Arkansas, and I'll be talking about the history of Elvis Presley. Further, all information for this video was gathered from Britannica.com's biography on Elvis Presley, the American singer and actor. Now, let's dive right in. Elvis Presley, in full Elvis Aaron Presley, was born January 8, 1935, in Tupelo, Mississippi, and died August 16, 1977, in Mississippi, Tennessee. He is an American popular singer, widely known as the King of Rock and Roll, and one of rock music's dominant performers from the mid-1950s until his death. Presley grew up dirt poor and moved to Memphis as a teenager, and with his family was off welfare only a few weeks when producer Sam Phillips at Sun Records, a local blues label, responded to his audition tape with a phone call. Several weeks worth of recording sessions ensued with a band consisting of Presley, guitarist Scotty Moore, and bassist Bill Black. The repertoire consisted of the kind of material for which Presley would become famous: blues and country songs, Tin Pan Alley ballads, and gospel hymns. Presley knew some of this music from the radio, some of it from his parents' Pentecostal church and the group sings he attended at the Reverend Brewster's Black Memphis Church, and some of it from the Beale Street Blues clubs he began frequenting as a teenager. Presley was already a flamboyant personality, with relatively long greased black hair and wild-colored clothing combinations. But his full musical personality did not emerge until he and the band began playing with blues singer Arthur Big Boy Crudup's song, That's All Right, Mama, in July 1954. They arrived at a startling synthesis, eventually dubbed rockabilly, retaining many of the original's blues inflections, but with Presley's high tenor voice adding a lighter touch, and with a basic rhythm striking a much more supple groove. The sound was the hallmark of the 5 singles Presley released on Sun over the next year, although none of them became a national hit. By August 15, 1955, when he released the 5th, Mystery Train, arguably his greatest record ever, he had attracted a substantial Southern following for his recordings. His live appearances in regional roadhouses and clubs, and his radio performances on the nationally aired Louisiana Hayride. Presley's management was then turned over to Colonel Tom Parker, a country music hustler who had made stars of Eddie Arnold and Hank Snow. Parker arranged for Presley's song catalog and recorded contract to be sold to major New York City-based enterprises Hill and Range and RCA Victor, respectively. Sun received a total of $35,000. Elvis got $5,000. He began recording at RCA Studios in Nashville, Tennessee, with a somewhat larger group of musicians, but still including Moore, Black, and Fontana, and began to create a national sensation with a series of hits: Heartbreak Hotel, Don't Be Cruel, and Love Me Tender, all shook up and more. From 1956 through 1958, he completely dominated the bestseller charts and ushered in the age of rock and roll, opening doors for both white and black rock artists. His television appearances, especially those on Ed Sullivan's Sunday night variety show, set records for the size of the audiences. Even his films, A Few Slight Vehicles, were box office smashes. Presley became the teen idol of his decade, greeted everywhere by screaming hordes of young women, and when it was announced in early 1958 that he had been drafted and would enter the U.S. Army, there was the rarest of all pop culture events, a moment of true grief. More important, he served as the great cultural catalyst of his period. Elvis projected a mix of humility and self-confidence, of intense commitment and comic disbelief in his ability to inspire frenzy. He inspired literally thousands of musicians, initially those more or less like-minded Southerners from Jerry Lee Lewis and Carl Perkins on down, who were the first generation of rockabillys, and later people who had far different combinations of musical and cultural influences and ambitions. From John Lennon to Bruce Springsteen, Bob Dylan to Prince, it was impossible to think of a rock star of any importance who did not owe an explicit debt to Presley. Beyond even that, Presley inspired his audience. "It was like he whispered his dream in all our ears, and then we dreamed it," said Springsteen at the time of Presley's death. You do not have to want to be a rock and roll star or even a musician to want to be like Elvis, which meant, ultimately, to be free and uninhibited, and yet still a part of the everyday. Literally millions of people, an entire generation or two, define their sense of personal style and ambition in terms that Elvis first personified. As a result, he was anything but universally adored. Those who did not worship him found him despicable. No one found him ignorable, however. Preachers and pundits declared him an anathema. His Pentecostally derived hip-swinging stage style and breathy vocal asides were declared obscene. Racists denounced him for mingling black music with white, and Presley was always scrupulous in crediting his black sources, one of the things that made him different from the Tin Pan Alley writers and singers who had for decades lifted black styles without credit. He was pronounced responsible for all teenage hooliganism and juvenile delinquency. Yet, in every appearance on television, he appeared affable, polite, and soft-spoken, almost shy. It was only with a band at his back and a beat in his ear that he became Elvis the Pelvis. In 1960, Presley returned from the Army, where he served as a soldier in Germany rather than joining the Special Services Entertainment Division. Those who regarded him as a commercial hype without talent expected him to fade away. Instead, he continued to have hits from recordings stockpiled just before he entered the Army. Upon his return to the States, he picked up pretty much where he had left off, churning out a series of more than 30 movies, from Blue Hawaii to Change of Habit. Over the next 8 years, almost none of which fit any genre other than Elvis movie, which meant a light comedic romance with musical interludes. Most had accompanying soundtrack albums, and together the movies and the records made him a rich man, although they nearly ruined him as any kind of artist. Presley did his best work in the 1960s on singles either unconnected to the films or only marginally stuck into them. Recordings such as It's Now or Never, Are You Lonesome Tonight, and Little Sister, Can't Help Falling in Love, and Return to Sender, and Viva Las Vegas. Presley was no longer a controversial figure. He had become one more predictable mass entertainer, a personage of virtually no interest to the rock audience that had expanded so much with the advent of the new sounds of the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and Bob Dylan. By 1968, the changes in the music world had overtaken Presley. Both movie grosses and record sales had fallen. In December, his one-man Christmas TV special aired, a tour de force of rock and roll and rhythm and blues. It restored much of his dissipated credibility. In 1969, he released a single having nothing to do with the film, Suspicious Minds. It went to #1. He also began doing concerts again and quickly won back a sizable following, although it was not nearly as universal as his audience in the 1950s. In the main, it was Southern and Midwestern, working class and unsophisticated, and overwhelmingly female. For much of the next decade, he was again one of the top live attractions in the US. For a variety of reasons, he never performed outside of North America. Presley was now a mainstream American entertainer, an icon, but not so much an idol. He had married in 1967, without much furor, became a parent with the birth of his daughter, Lisa Marie, in 1968, and got divorced in 1973. He made no more movies, although there was a good concert film, Elvis on Tour. His recordings were of uneven quality, but on each album he included a song or two that had focus and energy. Hits were harder to come by. Suspicious Minds was his last #1, and Burning Love, 1972, his final top 10 entry. But thanks to these concerts, Spectacular is best described by critic John Londo as an apotheosis of American musical comedy, he remained a big money earner. He now lacked the ambition and power of his early work, but that may have been a good thing. He never seemed a dated relic of the 1950s, trying to catch up to trends, but was just a performer, unrelentingly himself. In the summer of 1977, the night before he was to begin yet again another concert, he died of a heart attack, brought on largely by drug abuse. He was 42 years old. Almost immediately upon hearing of his death, mourners from around the world gathered at Graceland to say farewell to the poor boy who had lived out the American dream. So, with that, I want to conclude this historical video and encourage you to listen to some Elvis music today. Thank you for watching, and please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or comments about today's historical topic and video. Would like to share what your group talked about in relation to today's video, or more generally, would be interested in volunteering with Generation Connection. Generation Connection appreciates your continued support. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe below.